Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Rebecca and I'm the event planner of the Microsoft Reactor New York. Before we begin, we recommend checking in to receive session resources. There are a lot of Learn modules on the check-in page. We have a GitHub repo on the check-in page. Definitely check in, get those resources. It's all neatly on this one web page, so check it out. The website is aka.ms/reactor check-in, and the event ID is 15000. I dropped that into the chat as well, and I'll have it up on the screen again in a little bit. So quickly, just to cover our code of conduct, Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and our presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but we just ask that you're mindful of your commentary, you remain professional and on topic. Our event guidelines, this session is recorded. It is live right now on YouTube and will be available later on demand. If you have questions, feel free to submit them into the chat. If you have not yet participated on a YouTube live stream, you do need to be signed in with an account to interact there. So if you haven't done so yet, you can do that now. Or, if you have questions you're not able to send us right now, you can always message us later. So today's a session. Let's bring up Jay.
Hey there. Thanks a
Welcome.
lot. I appreciate it, Rebecca. How are you today?
I'm great. So this is Jay Gordon. He's a cloud advocate here at Microsoft Reactor. He'll be walking us through how to deploy Bicep files using GitHub Actions. So that's exciting. It looks like we've got a few people in the room already. Again, if you haven't checked in yet, welcome from Berlin. We've got Philip joining us. Hello, welcome, Philip.
Hi, Philip.
Yeah, anybody in the chat, feel free to let us know where you're joining from, what your experience level is, what you're hoping to gain from this session. Or, I know Jay from previous sessions, he's a big fan of the Yankees, right? So if you want to talk about that too, we're here for it.
Absolutely. So why don't we jump into my slides and we'll kind of get started here. I think that we've got some cool stuff to talk about. It's going to be a pretty fast-paced session. I hope you're prepared. I've got a whole lot for you. My name, like Rebecca said, is Jay Gordon. I'm a cloud advocate. I do a lot around IT operations, infrastructure, things that help people get into and using the cloud. And so I really do appreciate you taking part. And if you want to send me any response, any information, if you have questions, my Twitter is always the best way to get in touch with me. After this session, I welcome you to follow me and interact. And I am also always doing Azure Fun Bites. It's every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Learn TV. I'll get you more information about that if you check out my Twitter. So let's talk about our agenda really quickly. We're going to be reviewing the components of this workshop. We'll configure the dependencies. We'll secure our credentials with Key Vault, and then we're going to deploy our application to Azure Kubernetes service. All right. And we'll get into all those different components as we continue along. So if you're going to follow along, you're going to need a few things to get your prerequisites in. You're going to need an SSH public key. If you don't know how to do that, it's in the docs. We'll be able to show you how to do that once we get to those docs. You can use the template repo so you can run GitHub Actions. It should be in your own account. You can't use the public template to run GitHub Actions. You need to have it a part of your user. An Azure account, we're going to be building something for Azure. So an Azure account really helps. $200 of free credit. We'll get to that link in a second. And then you're going to want to clone your repository in either Cloud Shell or locally. I'm going to be using a Visual Studio Code today. So if you want to sign up for Azure, keep this up for a second. You can go to github.ms/CDA free Azure, 12 months of free services, 25 other free services always, and $200 in free credit. If you want to follow along and actually do this workshop yourself, you can also just watch this video and follow along after the fact. You can go to aka.ms/devops/AKS Bicep, or just github.com/jdestro/AKS Bicep. And you can go ahead and just use the template, and you don't need to fork it. You just want to use the template, and what it'll do is create an entire version for you that copies exactly what I have into your own personal repository. And so we're going to be building today a demo app. The demo app is going to be just a simple .NET application that's using, I believe, JavaScript for the front end, and it's also using Redis to store our votes, which is either cats or dogs. I'm voting dogs. So let's answer a few questions before we actually start building things. Sound good? All right, so let's do this. Cool. So first question is, what is Bicep? Well, we can start out with an intro on what it is, which is a domain-specific language for deploying Azure resources declaratively. So you could think of it as the next generation of ARM templates, which if you work with in the past, you know that they came with a burden of working with JSON. So Bicep has a simpler syntax compared, and it's aimed at simplifying the authoring experience. So a good analogy to understand the relationship between Bicep and ARM would be similar to the relationship between TypeScript and JavaScript. TypeScript is like Bicep, JavaScript is like ARM. And Bicep transpiles down to a standard ARM template into JSON, which means that the ARM JSON is effectively being treated as an intermediate language. And all the work is being done in open source on GitHub, and you can keep view of it. It's been like that since day one of how the product is evolving. So Bicep has a very readable, writable syntax. It's similar to ARM templates and Terraform. Bicep is a declarative language where you say what you want and Azure makes it so. So opposed to imperative approaches such as using Azure CLI or PowerShell that require you to tell Azure how to do things procedurally. With Bicep, you don't need to worry about the complexities of how. With modules, you can break up your Bicep code into manageable chunks. Bicep has a first-class authoring experience. It has rich type safety, validation, IntelliSense, a bunch of features. There's a really great Visual Studio Code extension. It really makes it a lot easier to start authoring your templates. And Bicep also offers a decompile command, so you can take your ARM template and convert it to Bicep. There's a bunch of tools that you can use, including a Bicep playground that will let you actually transpile your ARM templates directly into Bicep. So why use it? Day zero support for all the different Azure resource types and API versions. Let's continue along. No state files, which means you don't have to actually store a state file in something like Azure Storage or keep it locally as part of a repository. Pre-fight validation, so you can fail fast, so you know where your problems are first and foremost before actually using it and deploying it. The VS Code extension is part of the tooling, along with it being directly into Azure CLI. You can use Azure PowerShell. And like I said, there's this Bicep playground where you can get different types of Bicep templates. Marcus was kind enough to put a blog together, Marcus Felling. If you go to that blog post on the bottom, you can see why you would maybe want to use Bicep over Terraform. All right. So let's keep going along. So what's GitHub Actions? We covered what Bicep was, but GitHub Actions is first and foremost, it's first-class CI/CD. It's an automation tool for any software workflow related to your repo. We've been using it for CI/CD, but that's only one way. You could run a workflow when someone comments on an issue, or when someone forks your repo, you'll get actions kicked off. but it's really good at CI/CD, and it can deploy almost anywhere. So a workflow is a configurable automated process made up of one or more jobs. You must create a YAML file to define your workflow configuration. GitHub Actions is available with GitHub Free, GitHub Pro, GitHub Free for Organizations, GitHub Team, GitHub Enterprise Cloud, GitHub Enterprise Server, and GitHub AE. So there's lots and lots of places that you can actually use it. You can create runners for your build process. You can use it native to Windows, Linux, Mac. So you have all these different cross-platform ways to actually deploy, or I should say do builds. Public repos are free. Private repos include 2,000 free minutes. And there are more than 2,000 if you need to use that more in build time. You need to use the paid offering. And then self-hosted runners for Windows, Linux, Mac are capable. So you install an agent on your build environment if you have a specific build environment or you're worried about security or something like that. And you can set that up. And so the next part is Key Vault, which is where we're going to be storing our secrets. So we have a multitude of places in the world of software development where you can store secrets, and the list is pretty exhaustive, but there's a few common places that we can keep them. And right now we can use GitHub Secrets, which we were going to be using in just a little bit. We're going to be using these different application platform potentially to store our secrets, like app settings and Azure App Service, or secrets in AKS. And then centralized key store, which is what we're going to be using today in Azure Key Vault. So it's a centralized place to actually store your secrets and certificates. And so why should we use it? In addition to being a central location to store our secrets, Key Vault layers on additional benefits to managing our secrets. Fine-grained access control, network access control. We can limit exactly where we actually can get those secrets and where they can go. So we've got a lot of different options to be able to keep your access control, backups, logging, secret rotation of your secrets, keep them secure, keep them easy to access. And then finally, a part of our intro, we're going to get into our actual demo in just a few minutes, is Azure Kubernetes Service. And so what is it? It's a serverless Kubernetes experience. It's integrated continuous integration and continuous delivery is possible. It provides you enterprise-grade security and governance. You can guide your development and operations teams on a single platform to rapidly build, deliver, and scale applications with confidence. So if you think about it if ARM, or Azure Resource Manager, is the control plane for all of Azure, AKS can be a control plane for your Kubernetes configurations. And so you'll use this to build, manage Kubernetes clusters. You can orchestrate any type of workload running in the environment of your choice, whether you want to move .NET applications to Windows Server containers, modernize Java applications in Linux containers, or run microservices in the public cloud, at the edge, in hybrid environments. You can even use your own data center if you're using AKS on Azure Stack HCI. So there's so many different solutions for you to run your orchestrated containers with Kubernetes. So why don't we get to work? We'll follow along. Go in the chat, ask questions if you need them. This will be recorded, so you can also just follow along at a later date. So I've got my screen up, and what we're going to do is work together. I'm going to put myself right down here in the corner. What we're going to be doing is using this template that I've come up with, AKS Bicep, that's got all the instructions on the left side. You can see here. So we're able to use all the different instructions that we need to be able to actually build this demo and deploy it on our own, if you'd like to. So if you're here in the AKS Bicep repo, you're going to just click use this template, And then it'll give you the ability to copy the template into your account with your own repository name. I've already done that. And here we go. This is where my actions will run. You can see I've already got a failed action because the code is still generic set up. And so let's move ahead. As we said before, we need to have an SSH public key in order to actually do anything here. So to create a key, I've got an example right here, SSH keygen. And if you're not familiar with it, I really recommend taking a look on, you can use a popular search and look up SSH public key generation. But that command will get you one really quickly. The next thing you need to do is you're going to need to clone this repository. And so I'm just going to go here to code, local. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to clone repo here. I'm going to go ahead and open it up in VS Code. Just going to say elect repo location. Okay, and we'll open it up. And now we've got our repo. And you can see in here, I've got a git ignore file. And the big reason why I've created that git ignore file is I like to set up a scratch file that I'm not going to save. And I also am going to be saving some credentials locally. And I don't necessarily want them to get checked in. So I've got a git ignore file. I've got my Bicep template. I've got a parameters file that's going to be modified. And then I've got my GitHub deployment for my GitHub Actions workflow. So we'll go through those as we progress through the session. So we need to get our subscription ID and set it as a variable. And to do that, you can just run this command in our terminal. So subscription equals AZ account show query ID. And what it does is it actually drops our subscription into a variable. So if I just go echo subscription, you can see there's my subscription ID. Then what we need to do is set up some shell environment variables for our location and the name that we're going to be using for our resource group, our cluster, and our key vault. I've simplified this where we're just using one name because naming things are difficult. So we're just going to we're going to use the location of East US. We're going to use the name AKS Bicep 02, which is what I named my template repository that I've stored locally. So all I have to do is paste in these two different environment variables into my shell. If you're using PowerShell, obviously, this is going to be a little bit different of a process. So now I've got my environment variables for location and the name. The name should be unique. If you need to, just use some random name and numbers, whatever it is. Just store it as a variable. So the next thing we're going to do is create the resource group in our shell. And a resource group is where all of our resources are. Pretty simple. That's where we keep everything within a Azure deployment. Everything is in specific resource groups, and it's kind of like a carton of eggs. You can take eggs out. You can put eggs back in. And if you don't like your dozen of eggs, you can throw the whole thing out. So we're going to go ahead and use those environment variables to create our resource group. So there you can see this is where our resource group is. It's underneath my my subscription, and you can see here, there it is. So this is all from the API. It puts everything in JSON. And so once we finish that, we need to create a service principal. And a service principal are credentials that allow you to log into your Azure account when running GitHub Actions. And so what I'm going to do is I have already kind of set it up here. So we have our name environment variable, our contributor role. Let me bring this up so it's a little bit bigger so you can see. So what we're doing is we're running an Azure CLI command, and then we're specifying the scope for that specific resource group, and then we're saving that is a service principal.txt file. So it's just saving it locally. And that's the big reason why we have it here in our git ignore, so we can't check it in. So what it's going to do is it's going to save my credentials for this service principal in that text file. Here it is. This is in JSON format. It contains a client ID, a secret, a subscription ID. All this, we need this in order to actually connect our GitHub repository to our Azure account. So what I want to do now is I need to create a few GitHub Action secrets environment variables. So I'm just going to copy this, put it in another window so that you can kind of follow along to what I'm doing. And so where I have to go next in order to create these environment variables is here on the side with the triple dots. We'll go to settings for the repository. And if you scroll down, you can see here there's secrets. Let me make it a little blown up so you can see secrets right there. And action secrets are environment variables that are encrypted. So you don't have to worry about clear text being passed along with your credentials for your Azure account. We don't want that. So we're going to create 3 different secrets that we need here. So what we're going to be doing is storing our Azure credentials. So I'm just going to go here in my action secret section and click new repository. I should say new secret for the repo. I'm going to name it Azure Credentials. And then what I'll do is I'll just grab these entire credentials that we got from our Azure CLI command that created our service principal. And I'm going to just dump them all right here. So the entire piece of JSON, I'm going to throw right in here and then click add secret at the bottom. So that's our first one. Then we need our Azure resource group. That's the resource group that we created. So we're going to just create new repository secret. And we're going to just call it AKS Bicep 02. We'll add that secret. Cool. And then our third one is our Azure subscription. And so that's the subscription ID that we looked at before. All we have to do actually is go back to our creation. You can see here is of our resource group, and you can see that our subscription ID is there, but it's also stored as an environment variable. So if you need it, you can just go echo subscription. If you're on a Mac, pipe it in the PB copy. So let's bring back up this. Here we go. And so our final action secret that we need. So now that creates a service principal trust between my GitHub account and my my Azure account. So now my GitHub actions are allowed to log into Azure and create resources. All right. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section. I'll see if I can get to them. We're going to keep moving along. So we've taken care of these first parts. We've created our resource group. We've created our secrets. And the next thing we need to do is create a key vault. Now, what I've done here is I've provided you with a CLI command that allows you to use AZ Key Vault create. And what it's going to do is it's going to give it a name. And then that name is that AKS Bicep 02 variable. The resource group, same name variable. The location of where our key vault is going to be is in East US. You can set it to what particular region you need, especially if you have some specific governance on where data has to be stored for your apps. There's so many different places and regions for you to do that. We can say, here's some options that we can add. So we can say that we can access our key vault for template deployments, for disk encryption, and for deployment to virtual machines. So you can do it that way, or you can use the portal, and the portal gives you a next, last way of creating it. I've already created this because it takes a few minutes to create a key vault. And you can see I've got it online here. And what I need to do in here is to store some secrets. I need some secrets that we're going to be able to grab from the parameters file. And from that parameters file, specify that we're going to access this SSH RSA public key, the one I told you about. And that actually allows you to have SSH access to the underlying Kubernetes cluster virtual machines. So if you're doing some troubleshooting, you'll be able to still get in. Your service principal client ID, and that is right here. And then the service principal client secret. So it's kind of like a username and password. We don't want to send those over the wire in the parameter file. We'd rather store it here in our key vault. So we need to create these three, and it's just a matter of a couple of commands. So let's go through that. So the first section we need to do here in our key vault is go to secrets, because we're not going to be storing keys or certificates. We're going to be storing secrets. And we can click generate import. And what we're going to be doing is giving it a name. And so based on our documentation, the first one for our SSH public key is this name. So what we're going to be doing is creating the secret name as SSH RSA public key. Now we need to actually enter the secret. And the easiest way for me to do that is I can just go in here to my terminal. I'm going to cat my SSH key. So I keep it in .ssh id rsa.pub. And then what I can do is just cat it, or I should say pipe it into pb copy as well. I mean, you can also just copy and paste it directly. But what I'm going to be doing is taking this value and just putting it right here. And you can also see that you can look at the value you've stored, just to double check. And we can set activation dates and expiration dates if we need to have this key rotated every so often. And then we just click create, and that secret is created. I don't want to save this. No. Next, we'll go to generate import, because we need to get to our next secret. That's our service principal client ID. And so we'll go back here, same process, service principal client ID. We'll go here to the SPText file and just grab our client ID. The reason I'm showing you all this way, we're doing it manually, is that normally you would have to use multiple Bicep modules in order to be able to create your key vault and store your secrets. I wanted to show you kind of like piece by piece how it all fits together. So create, I've got my my second secret that I've stored, and now I need to just add my last one. And our last one is our service principal client secret. So we put in our username with the client ID, and now we're going to put in our password. And we're going to go ahead and this is so we can set up a trust for our actual AKS cluster. So our service principal client secret, that is what this is called. And then we can go to client secret, copy that, enter the value, click create. So now we have our three secrets. Cool. And if we go back here to our overview, we can see that we actually have a URI that we can access if we need to programmatically access these secrets and then display them somewhere. That's basically how it's able to create. And you can retrieve secrets using Azure CLI. You can use it using the various SDKs, and you can set up different access policies, networking, identity management, all the different things that you expect to be able to do with your Azure account for these different resources that you create. You're able to do right here in the Key Vault portal. So we've got our credentials stored as secrets. And now what we need to do is to update the parameters file. And we just want to give it the name of our resource group. And so our parameters file is located right here in the root of our repository directory. And what we're going to do is take a look. I think I took that out, actually. So we've got some names that we want to use here. We have a unique cluster name and DNS prefix. I have actually taken that out. I have to update the doc. I've taken that whole thing out just to simplify it. And it's automatically just utilizing that from the AKS template. And we'll look at that in just a second. So what we're going to be doing now is updating where exactly. So I have these 3 parameters that we just created secrets for. And you can see right here, SSH RSA public key, we're referencing a particular key vault that we created. And so all we need to do is take this section right here. And we're just going to update some of these parameters. And we can just go to edit, replace. And what we're going to do is copy that, paste it in here. So we're going to update our vault's name, which is AKS Bicep 02. Our subscription ID, which we got from before, right here. And our actual resource group we actually need to add in here, and that will be AKS Bicep 2. So we'll replace these 3, and you can see, oops, got an extra slash. Let's just get rid of these here. So we've got our subscription set, and we've pointed it to the specific resource that we've created for our key vault. And within that key vault, we're specifying these secret names. So why did we need to do that? Well, simply stated that if you go into this AKS Bicep template, you can see that there are a number of parameters that get set. So DNS prefix, like I said, it's just going to use the resource group name. And you can see how it's just declarative. It's allowing you to just add these parameters, provide strings for them. You can add descriptions so you can actually know what they are. And we've got all these different values, so we can specify what the size of the disk is. So we could add all these different parameters into our parameter file, so we don't have to manually hard code them into this Bicep template. But I've taken care of just some 3 key things. And so we've got our unique cluster name parameter. We've got our Linux profile, username. And then now we have here our public key that's stored as a secret. So that's, if we go back to our secret section, that's why we created these 3. That's why we have our client secret, because we need to access it here. And this parameter specifically references exactly where it is. All right. Looks like I overcooked this parameters file, and I'm going to fix it really quick. Let's see. Yeah, I did it. All right. Give me 1 second. Let me back up and fix this. Sorry about that. You know, when you do it live, sometimes you make mistakes. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'll do replace again. So go to edit, replace, pop that in here. Vault name, AKS Bicep 02. Subscription ID we got before. So let's go ahead and just grab that. And then we'll just update the last parameter, which is our resource group. And that's the same here. Sorry, it's not a little easier, but I have made this more difficult for myself for some reason. And it's always fun when you're doing it live and you are making it more difficult. So, all right, O2. There. All right. So our key vaults are updated: subscription, the resource group, the provider, the actual key vault API that we're accessing, and the name of the key vault. All right. So that's all set. We've got our 3 parameters specified that for our SSH public key, our service principal client ID, and our secret name. So I've saved it. Okay. So I've saved this file. You can see it's in my actual source control. And for the person that's asking the question, what's a Bicep file? Bicep file is a template for authoring Azure resources. So you can basically declaratively state what you want created, how you want it created, where you want it created, and it's a domain-specific language for Azure Resource Manager. So we've got to the point where we've made all of our changes. And then we're going to take a look at the action file. So we've set up our application to be able to start deploying what it is we need. And I'm sorry I'm moving so fast, but we only have a little bit of time left. I've got this YAML file that's our GitHub workflow that when we have a push to our repository, we're going to, first of all, reference our resource group, or I should say our repository GitHub Actions secrets. So that's just showing this variable right here. We need the cluster name, which is Azure RG, the resource group, Azure RG, that's the name variable we created before. The namespace, that's where the namespace within Kubernetes we're going to be saving and creating our application. And then the app name of the specific application that we're building. And so what we can do is look at our runner, and our job is going to build and deploy everything on Ubuntu. We're going to check out our code. In this case, we're not checking out any code. We're logging into Azure, so that's why we saved our credentials. We're deploying our Bicep file, and we'll take a look. We've got our template right here, AKS Bicep, and the parameters, Azure deploy.parameters.json, where we modified our parameters before. Then what it'll do is it'll set the target for our Azure Kubernetes. And so it'll use our credentials, it'll give our cluster a name, and it'll use our resource group and specify what I'm changing is going to be done within this particular Kubernetes cluster. Then we're going to create the namespace where we keep everything. And then eventually we're going to deploy our app to AKS. And our deployment is actually just in this manifest file. So this is a standard manifest for Kubernetes in our deployment. You can see it's going to give all the information. So the name of our app, the front end, the back end, the node selector, and then the container itself. So the container image that we're going to be deploying. If you were creating your own AKS and ACR, Azure Container Registry combination, you would specify where your ACR is located. In this case, we're just going to be using these base images. All right. So let's go ahead and get to the part where we start deploying. So I've got the changes here to the Azure deploy file in our source control, and I'm just going to go ahead and add it. And we're going to be just staging this, and then we're going to just commit to the main branch. If you were working in a team, you probably wouldn't want to directly commit to main branch. You might want to have a separate branch to do so. But we're doing a demo today, and we're going to try to move along fast. So we're going to be saving a commit message, and we're going to say deploy to AKS. All right, and then we'll sync our changes. So what that's going to do here on the GitHub side is we'll go up to GitHub Actions. Pushing that is going to kick off a GitHub Actions workflow. And you can see right now we've got deploy to AKS. And so what's going to happen now is we're going to go through a build and deploy process that we specified in our workflow file. So it's going to set up our job. It's going to be running checkout main. So it's going to grab the repository and any code that we need. Then it's going to get to that next section where it actually logs into Azure and then specifies the environment. So the cluster name, the resource group, the namespace for Kubernetes, the application name in Kubernetes, and the provider, which is Azure R. And then what we get to the point is we're doing the deploy. And so you can see here, GitHub Actions looks at that workflow file and says, I'm supposed to kick off a build from this template using these parameters with this environment. So all these different environment variables that we specified within GitHub and within our I should say our parameters, we've got all this ready to go. And so it'll change the subscription context if necessary. It'll validate the template, and then it'll start creating your deployment. So this will take, depending on how many instances you have, this will take a few minutes, because what we're actually doing is we're creating a brand new AKS cluster, which is getting some underlying virtual machines. And to those virtual machines, we're applying a Kubernetes install. From there, we're going to be actually then deploying our application to that Kubernetes install. Now, I'm lucky enough that I've already got one of these finished. And so I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's done. So here's the action, and you can see I've built a new one here, and the build and deploy completed. And if we go to the build and deploy, you'll see we finished our entire process. It went ahead and it deployed our front end and our back end, and then it applied a public IP address. So you can see we get a cluster IP for internal IP addressing, and then we've got a load balancer, so we can actually access our application from the front end, from the web. And in order to be able to get that IP address, we can just log into AKS using AZCLI and just grab our credentials. So let's go back to the actual code here. We'll scroll down, and you can see I've given you a command to access your public IP from the load balancer. So what we're going to do is use the Azure CLI, and we're going to go over into this section right here, and we're just going to specify the name of our resource group, and that is, in this case, AKS Bicep 01. And actually, that's the name of our cluster. Sorry. And then the resource group is the same. So we're specifying we need to get the credentials for the AKS Bicep 01 cluster from the AKS Bicep 01 resource group. And so what it'll do is it'll access let's see. Oh, I see. It should be G, resource group, instead of name. Anyway, of course, let's see what I did wrong here. Unrecognized command, AKS AZ get credentials. Great. Let's see. Let's try this once more. Sorry about that. You do it live, right? Okay, so we'll set our resource group as Bicep 01 and our cluster name. And so now it'll go and it merged our AKS Bicep Kubernetes credentials into this kube.kube config file. And now what we can do is we can get the services. So here's an example of the output of what it will look like. What I need to do is get this load balancer IP. So I'm just going to kubectl get services, all namespaces. It's going to go into Kubernetes, and it's going to ask, what are the IP for all these different services? And you can see right here, here's the front end load balancer and the external IP address. So I'm just going to grab that, put it into a browser, and now we've got our application. It's up and it's online. Dogs, dogs, dogs all day, right? Cool. That's how everything is built. I know it's really fast. I really recommend that you take a look at some of the resources to get even more information than what we presented before. So here are some great places for you to get some resources. There's a quick start, deploy bicep files by using GitHub Actions. It's going to give you a similar version of what we did today. It helps you just deploy a storage file. If you go to this next link, you can get information on how to get started using Azure Kubernetes service, all the different product information. If you want documentation about Azure Key Vault security, aka.ms/security features 3_12.1. What is GitHub Actions for Azure? And then what is Bicep? So just some basic documentation that we've got set up. This Bicep Learn module, it's free education. It's free training. Okay? So you can use this to start learning more and more about Bicep if you go to aka.ms/bicep learn. And that's everything. And so to answer Rhea's questions, we're covering all things DevOps on Azure. While we also talking about the specific Azure DevOps products sometimes on this, we also really love to talk about all the different ways to use DevOps methodologies in order to create a great experience using Azure. So there's so many different tools. There's GitHub, which is just such a great way of integrating your code into Azure using the workflows. Makes sense to me. You can use pipelines if you want. You can do this deployment using pipelines if you want, but that's a different session. Okay. So I think we're just about out of time. I really want to say thank you. I super appreciate you all. One, dealing with my little mistakes because, these things happen. And also just thank you for being here, being a part, watching, talking in the chat. I really love having interaction with people. And there was a bunch of you that took part. Take a look, did what we had to do today to make our application start running. So vote dogs, you can vote cats, you can vote whatever you want, but just go ahead and give this a try so you can vote.
Thank you so much, Jay. This was fantastic. We did get a couple other questions. I know I was dropping a bunch of links and commentary myself into the chat, so it kind of pushed things around. So if you want to take a few seconds to scroll through that, if you have a few more minutes, I'm just going to quickly run through my 2 slides, and then if there's anything you miss and you want to answer, feel free. But
Sure.
yeah, so
the ARM TTK. So there's this question. Bicep is looking more and more powerful each day, but ARM template toolkit is already compatible. Yes, it is already compatible. There is a ARM template toolkit, and the extension now supports Bicep. You can go ahead. I think you need to the Bicep extension supports files, so that there are a bunch of different things that you can use. But I'm pretty sure the ARM template toolkit now includes Bicep. I think specifically for Azure DevOps, but it's in there. You can go to Azure/ARM-TTK on GitHub Actions, or I should say on GitHub. We answered what a Bicep file is.
I think there was a question related. One of the streams we're on right now is for the DevOps channel.
Sure. Yeah, I just answered that before and said, Microsoft DevOps on Microsoft, period. We want to just make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And while Azure DevOps is a great product, GitHub and GitHub Actions is just as viable a product to talk about. And so this channel, it seems appropriate because we want to talk about DevOps on Azure, not just Azure DevOps.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. So for our audience still tuning in, I dropped a link to our survey. We use that information basically to put together future programming. Let us know based on your experience and your background, kind of the things you want us to be putting out free content-wise. Give us some feedback there. And then also, if you're tuning in from one of the many channels that we are streaming to right now and you're not familiar, this session is brought to you by the Microsoft Reactor program, free community events for everyone. We are an international program. We have 12 physical spaces. If you're not familiar with us, definitely check us out. Go to microsoftreactor.com. We have a calendar of events. There's sessions around the world. So depending on where you're tuning in from, the time zone you're in, there might be sessions that are better for you. Also find us on Twitter. You can check us out. We'll have this session on demand on our Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. And also, if interested, you can go to aka.ms/reactor email sign up. We don't spam you. We just send one email a month to let you know what we have coming up in your local region.
Can I give them my Twitter account once
Sure.
more if
Yeah,
they want to
yeah,
follow?
yeah.
So if you want to find me on Twitter, you can just go to twitter.com/@jdestro or jdestro. And if you'd like to also check out Azure Fun Bites, it's a weekly show where we cover all these different subjects about Azure. This week we're going to be talking about WebAssembly. I always have a guest. These guests are incredible. We always learn so much together. So check that out if you'd like to. Thank you so much, Rebecca. You are a wonderful, wonderful host, and I really do appreciate your time as well.
Thanks, Jay. And I appreciate you coming on here and providing us your time as well. And to our audience for participating, thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.